They say a mother's love knows no bounds, but perhaps it should. My name is Eleanor Vance, I'm 78 years old, and I live on what my late husband left me. I always believed that I could somehow mend the broken parts of my son's life. After decades of watching him stumble, I decided to make one last, grand gesture. I took nearly $50,000, most of my retirement savings, and bought him a brand new truck for his 50th birthday. At the small celebratory dinner we'd gathered, surrounded by what little family we have left, my son, Mark, raised his glass for a toast. What he said in that moment didn't just break my heart, it incinerated the very foundation of our relationship. The evening unraveled into a tangle of bitter truths and devastating consequences that none of us could have predicted. If you wish to hear the rest of this difficult story, perhaps you'll follow along, and I'd be grateful to know where you're listening from in the comments below. We raised Mark in a modest 2-story house in the suburbs of Detroit. On paper, we were the picture-perfect middle-class American family. My late husband, Arthur, worked as a mechanical engineer at one of the automotive plants, providing us with a comfortable life. But beneath that veneer of normalcy, our home lacked something vital: warmth. Arthur was always a stern man, tall, with perpetually furrowed brows that made him seem angry even when he wasn't. His face rarely softened, especially not for our son. I often tried to be the buffer between Arthur's cold perfectionism and Mark's sensitive nature, but I was young and, if I'm honest, a little afraid of my husband's moods myself. As Mark grew, our house became too quiet. Arthur threw himself into his work, often coming home long after Mark was in bed. When he was home, conversation was limited to practical matters: Mark's grades, his chores, the state of the lawn. Never feelings, never dreams. I still remember Mark's 13th birthday, the first one after we lost my mother. I'd tried to make it special, but Arthur came home late, ate the dinner I'd prepared, and went straight to his study. Around 9, he emerged with a package wrapped in newspaper, a heavy set of socket wrenches. "You'll need these if you're ever going to be useful," he said, before returning to his paperwork. No cake, no card, no "happy birthday" from his father. I brought Mark a cupcake later, but he pretended to be asleep. I heard him crying silently into his pillow, clutching that heavy wrench set as if it were some kind of proof that his father at least acknowledged his existence. School was never Mark's refuge, it was his battlefield. He wasn't a bad student, but he wasn't the academic prodigy Arthur expected. Mark was good with his hands, always tinkering, but his father saw that as a lesser pursuit. Mark would bring home a model car he'd built, and Arthur would point out the flaws in the paint. "Good enough isn't good," he'd say, never "I'm proud of you" or "well done." The rare times Arthur attended Mark's baseball games, he'd sit stone-faced, then critique his batting stance on the drive home. When Mark was 16, he won 3rd place in a regional auto body competition. He'd spent weeks on it. He placed the small trophy on the mantelpiece. Arthur glanced at it over dinner and said, "3rd place just means 2 people did it better." Mark removed the trophy that night and never displayed another achievement in our home. He didn't want to go to a 4-year college, he wanted to go to a trade school. Arthur refused to pay for it. "No son of mine is going to be a simple mechanic," he'd bellowed. So Mark tried college, hated it, and dropped out after 2 years. He stayed in Detroit, bouncing from one job to another, an entry-level position at a parts distributor, a stint at a body shop. He tried, Lord, how he tried, but he was channeling all that childhood need for validation into a kind of restless, unfocused ambition. Every time he'd get a small promotion, he'd call, and I could hear the hope in his voice. But he could never seem to hold on to it. As the years passed, our relationship settled into a worried rhythm. I'd call, he'd reassure me he was fine, but I could hear the strain. He dated, even married for a few years, but it fell apart. How could he build a life with someone when he'd been taught he wasn't good enough to build anything? By the time he reached his late 40s, he was working for a small landscaping crew, his marriage over, living in a small apartment. I lived with this quiet ache, this guilt. I had my savings, my tidy home. From the outside, I was a comfortable widow. Inside, I was still the mother of that 13-year-old boy, desperately wishing I could go back and protect him from his father. We've kept it inside to protect the finish, Rick explained, and we've got the giant bow all ready to go. He handed me an envelope containing all the paperwork, warranty information, owner's manual, and the title. There's a temporary registration good for 30 days. After that, he'll need to register it himself. I ran my hand along the hood, feeling the cool, smooth metal. It's perfect, I whispered. My chest tightened with emotion. This was really happening. 50 years of watching my son struggle had culminated in this moment, this grand gesture that would surely finally give him the break he deserved. Rick walked me through the features, showing me how to adjust the seats and navigate the entertainment system. We've filled the tank and it's ready to go whenever you are, he said. Are you sure you don't want us to deliver it? It's a lot bigger than what you're used to. I nodded gratefully, and we spent the next half hour with Rick patiently teaching me how to maneuver the massive vehicle in their backlot. By the time we finished, I felt reasonably confident I could drive it without incident. I left my own car there, arranging to pick it up the next day. The plan was taking shape perfectly. Next stop was Vincenzo's. I met with Marco, the owner, who remembered me. Mrs. Vance. The last time I saw you, your son was still in high school, he recalled with a warm smile. He still comes in every few months. Always orders the same thing. The veal parmesan with extra sauce on the side, I said, smiling at this small connection to my son's life. Marco nodded, and a glass of the house Chianti. Never changes. I had arranged for a private room at the back, large enough for the 12 people expected. My sister-in-law, Sarah, and her husband Dave would be there, along with a few of Mark's closest friends. Marco helped me confirm the special menu. And after the main course, I explained, I'll make an excuse to go outside, and then I'll text Sarah to bring Mark out to the parking lot where the truck will be waiting with the bow. Marco clasped his hands together. How wonderful. He will be so surprised. If only he knew how surprised. I was hoping Mark would be surprised enough to smile, to show real joy, maybe even to hug me properly. The fantasy of it played in my mind constantly now. I went back to my own house by 4 and immediately called Sarah to confirm details. Everything's set, she assured me. Dave and I are picking up Tom and Linda. Has Mark mentioned anything about tonight? I asked. Not really. You know Mark. He doesn't make a fuss about birthdays, but he knows we're all going to dinner. He thinks it's just a small family thing. I hesitated before asking the next question. How has he been lately? Since he lost that last job? Sarah's pause told me everything before she even spoke. About the same, dear. Keeping to himself mostly. Still talks about that handyman idea, but, you know, he gets in his own way. He needs a win, Eleanor. Still the same then. Still closed off, still struggling with that shadow, still needing something to break through. After hanging up, I sat on my sofa, staring at the wall. Tonight would change everything, I told myself firmly. I spent that afternoon rehearsing what I would say. Should I make a speech? Keep it simple? I practiced different versions in my head, trying to prepare for every possible reaction. I even practiced how I would handle it if he seemed underwhelmed. It's just something I thought you might enjoy, I would say casually, as if the truck hadn't cost me most of my savings, as if it weren't a physical manifestation of my lifelong quest to see him happy. The next morning, I woke early, my stomach in knots. Today was the day. I kept myself busy, tending to my houseplants and tidying the kitchen. I put on a new dress for the occasion, a nice floral one, and the pearls Arthur had given me. At 3 in the afternoon, I drove back to the dealership. Rick had the truck parked by the front entrance, the enormous red bow secured to the hood. She's all yours, Mrs. Vance, he said, handing me the keys. Good luck tonight. Driving the truck to the restaurant required all my concentration. I arrived early, at 5:30, and parked it in a special spot Marco had reserved, partially hidden from the main entrance but perfectly positioned for the big reveal. I took several deep breaths before heading inside. The private room looked beautiful. White tablecloths, elegant place settings. I placed the wrapped box containing the truck's key fob on the gift table. Inside the box was also a card I'd spent hours writing. By 6, guests began arriving. Sarah embraced me warmly. "You look lovely, Eleanor. You're a wonder, doing all this." At 6:30, I got the text I'd been waiting for. Mark had arrived. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stepped into the main dining room to greet him and froze. Mark wasn't alone. A woman I'd never seen before was with him, her arm linked tightly with his, her face bright with a smile. She was maybe in her late 40s, attractive in a sharp way, with bright blonde hair and an expensive-looking dress. Mark saw me and stopped. For a moment, genuine surprise crossed his face. "Ma. I didn't know you'd be here already." I found my voice. "Surprise," I managed, moving forward to give him our usual, slightly awkward hug. Then I turned to the woman, raising my eyebrows in silent question. "This is..." "Nancy," Mark said, a little hesitantly. "Nancy, my mother, Eleanor." Nancy extended a hand, her smile never faltering. "So wonderful to meet you. Mark has told me so much about you." This was news to me. Mark hadn't mentioned dating anyone, let alone someone serious enough to bring to a family birthday dinner. I pushed down my unease and led them to the private room where everyone else was waiting. The next hour passed in a blur of greetings, drinks, and appetizers. I watched Mark and Nancy from across the room, noting how comfortable they seemed, how she touched his arm when she laughed, how he actually smiled at her jokes. It was a side of my son I'd rarely seen, certainly not in a long time. Dinner was served, and conversation flowed. I said little, still processing Nancy's unexpected presence. Would the truck still have the impact I'd hoped for with her there? Would Mark be embarrassed by such an extravagant gift from his mother in front of a woman he was clearly trying to impress? Too late to change plans now. As the main courses were cleared, I excused myself, saying I needed to check on something. Instead, I hurried out to the parking lot, positioning myself next to the truck. My hands were trembling as I sent the text to Sarah, "Ready." 5 minutes later, the restaurant door opened, and Sarah led Mark outside, followed by the rest of the party. Mark looked confused until his eyes landed on the truck, and then on me, standing beside it. Time seemed to slow down. I watched his face, hungry for his reaction. His eyes widened slightly. His lips parted, but the joyous smile I'd been waiting for didn't come. Instead, he looked blank, unreadable. "Happy birthday, Mark," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "It's yours. For your new business. The exact model you've been talking about." He approached slowly, walking around the truck, studying it from every angle. The others hung back, watching, a few of them exchanging glances I couldn't interpret. "You bought this?" he finally asked. "Arthur passed away 5 years ago. He never retired, just worked until his heart gave out. After he was gone, I harbored a secret hope that perhaps Mark and I, without the shadow of his father's disapproval, might find a way to bridge the gap. Perhaps he might finally find his footing." Last Thanksgiving, during his visit, I noticed something that gave me pause. Mark had always been meticulous about his old, aging pickup, but that day I saw him just staring at it in the driveway, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The truck was nearly 20 years old, rust creeping up the wheel wells, and the repair bills were mounting. "She's just not worth fixing anymore, Ma," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Can't rely on it for work." Later that evening, I overheard him on the phone with his friend Dave, talking about starting his own handyman business, but he'd need a reliable vehicle. "Can't get a loan for a new truck, not with my credit," he'd said. There was an unusual animation in his voice when he described what he would get, a hint of the boyish excitement I hadn't heard in decades. That night, lying in my quiet house, I formulated a plan. Mark's 50th birthday was coming up in 6 months. What if I bought him that truck he so clearly needed, the one he'd never be able to get for himself? Not just any truck, but a brand new one. It would be the grandest gesture I could make, a tangible expression of all the belief I had in him, the belief his father never showed. Maybe, just maybe, it would finally give him the start he deserved. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt a flutter of hope. This time would be different. This time, he'd have to see how much I believed in him. The seed of the idea took root quickly. I spent my evenings researching trucks. I don't know much about computers, but I know how to find information. I looked up Ford F-150 models, options, and prices. I made notes in a spiral notebook, read countless reviews, and even called my nephew, who knows about cars, to learn the lingo. Mark's father had always demanded perfection, and I found myself doing the same. I discovered a particular Lariat model would be ideal, luxurious without being flashy, powerful without being excessive, something practical that would last him for decades. The price tag made my heart stop, nearly $50,000 for the configuration I wanted. It would mean liquidating a large portion of the nest egg Arthur had left me, the money I'd earmarked for my own long-term care. But I convinced myself it would be worth it. To get the money, I had to meet with my financial advisor, who gently tried to talk me out of it. I cashed in some bonds and moved money from my investments. There would be no more cruises with my church group, no replacing my own aging car for a few more years. Every dollar went into what I called the Mark's Future Fund, in my checkbook register. 4 months before his birthday, I contacted a Ford dealership nearby. The salesman, a young man named Rick, listened patiently as I explained my plan. "It's for my son's 50th, I told him. He's had a hard time, and he needs a reliable truck to start his own business." Something in my voice must have conveyed the deeper significance, because Rick's professional demeanor softened. "We'll make sure it's perfect, Mrs. Vance," he promised. "What color are you thinking?" That required more research. I called Mark's friend, Dave, under the guise of wanting to get him a nice tool set. "What's his favorite color for a truck?" I asked casually. "Oh, that's easy, Eleanor," Dave replied. "He's always commenting on that deep blue they make now. Navy something. Blue Jeans Metallic, it was called." I added it to the order, along with the premium interior, the navigation system, and the towing package I knew he'd need. Rick helped me navigate the paperwork, and I signed what felt like a mountain of forms, my hand trembling slightly. With each signature, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. This was the largest purchase of my life, by far. I arranged for the truck to be ready the week before his birthday. Rick suggested having a large red bow made for it, and I agreed immediately. In my imagination, I could see Mark's face when he first laid eyes on the truck, that rare, unguarded smile breaking through his usual worried expression. I pictured him actually hugging me, really hugging me, perhaps for the first time since he was a little boy. The financial sacrifice weighed on me heavily. There were nights I woke up in a cold sweat wondering if I'd been reckless. My safety net was nearly gone, and I'd have to be frugal to rebuild it. But then I'd remember that defeated look on Mark's face when he looked at his old truck, and determination would override my doubts. This wasn't just about a vehicle. It was about breaking through 50 years of feeling not good enough. As the weeks passed, my anticipation grew. I wasn't traveling, just driving across town. I called my sister-in-law, Sarah, letting her in on the surprise and asking her to help organize a birthday dinner at Vincenzo's, Mark's favorite Italian restaurant. "My goodness, Eleanor," she gasped when I told her about the truck. That's an incredible gift. That's almost everything." "It's important," I said simply, not knowing how to express that this gift represented every birthday card his father hadn't given, every school event he'd criticized, every achievement met with lukewarm silence. The truck was my last, grandest attempt to provide what had never been freely given, a foundation of support, a symbol of pride, a mother's love. The final bank transfer cleared a week before I was set to pick it up. Rick called to confirm that the truck had arrived and was being detailed. "It's a beauty, Mrs. Vance," he assured me. "Your son's going to be speechless." That night, I sat in my old armchair in the living room, looking out at the quiet street. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my expectations. What if this gesture finally healed that old wound? What if this was the beginning of a new chapter for my son, one where he finally felt valued and secure? The possibility made my old heart race. But a smaller, quieter voice whispered doubts. What if the truck wasn't enough? What if I wasn't enough? I pushed those thoughts away, unwilling to consider that this grand gesture might fail. 2 days before the dinner, Rick sent me a picture of the truck on his phone. It was even more beautiful than I'd imagined, gleaming blue under the dealership lights, the massive red bow adding a festive touch. I felt a surge of certainty. This time would be different. This time, I'd finally get through to my son. My drive to the dealership was on a bright, clear afternoon, the day of Mark's birthday. The familiar Michigan landscape passed by, but I barely saw it. I'd packed light, just my handbag, wanting to keep things simple. Mark didn't know I was coming to get him. As far as he knew, I'd be meeting him at the restaurant. The surprise was part of the plan. I drove my own car, a nondescript sedan, and headed straight for the Ford dealership. Rick greeted me with a warm handshake and led me to the service bay where the truck waited. Seeing it in person took my breath away. The blue jeans metallic paint had a depth and richness that photos couldn't capture. The truck was massive, powerful, and undeniably impressive. For me, Ma? He asked, his voice flat. I nodded, my hand trembling just slightly as I held out the small, wrapped box that held the key fob. It's all paid for, Mark. It's all yours. For your new business. He took the box but didn't open it. For a long, excruciating moment, he just stood there, looking at the massive, gleaming truck, then at the small box in his hand, and then at me. I couldn't read his expression at all. It was just blank. We should get back inside, he said finally, his voice quiet. Everyone's waiting. My heart sank. It felt like a heavy stone had dropped into my stomach as he turned and walked back toward the restaurant, the unopened gift still clutched in his hand. The others followed, murmuring among themselves. Nancy, his new girlfriend, gave me a look I couldn't decipher. Was it sympathy? Sarah, my sister-in-law, patted my arm. Give him time to process, Eleanor, she whispered. My goodness, it's a lot to take in. I stood alone in the parking lot, the beautiful blue truck suddenly looking foolish and forlorn with its giant red bow. This wasn't how I had imagined this moment at all. Where was the joy? The surprise? The hope for a fresh start I had been counting on for him? I returned to the dining room just as dessert was being served, a birthday cake brought out with 50 in candles blazing. Everyone sang, "Happy Birthday," and Mark blew out the candles with a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. The gift box sat unopened beside his plate. As Marco began serving the cake, Mark suddenly stood up, his wine glass in hand. The table fell silent. This was unusual. Mark was never one for speeches. My old heart lifted. Oh, perhaps now. Perhaps in his own way, he would acknowledge the gift, express his gratitude, maybe even talk about his hope for the new business. He cleared his throat. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, he began, his voice a bit thick. His eyes scanned the table, briefly meeting mine before moving on. 50 years. Hard to believe. There was a murmur of agreement around the table. Mark raised his glass higher. I'd like to make a toast, he continued. My pulse quickened. Here it comes, I thought. The moment I'd been waiting for. Mark's gaze locked with mine, his expression suddenly clear and cold. To my mother, he said clearly, who, after all these years, is still trying to buy my love with money. The words hit me like a physical blow. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. But then his friend Tom let out a loud, uncomfortable laugh, and Nancy gave a small, nervous giggle. Sarah looked down at her plate, her face flushed with embarrassment. Dave and Linda exchanged horrified glances. The room swam before my eyes. Still trying to buy my love with money. My own son had just humiliated me in front of everyone. He had dismissed my grandest gesture, the bulk of my savings, as nothing but a pathetic attempt to purchase affection. And the worst part, the very worst part, was that he wasn't entirely wrong. I felt the hot sting of tears behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. With a calm I didn't know I possessed, I slowly stood up, my old bones aching with the effort. I placed my napkin neatly beside my plate and I looked at my son. I said nothing. No angry retort, no hurt accusation, no pleading explanation. I simply turned, my back straight, and walked out of the room, out of the restaurant, and into the cool evening air. I walked right past that magnificent, terrible truck, and it was only when I reached the end of the block, under a streetlight, that I finally, mercifully, let the tears come. The night air hit my face, cooling the burning humiliation that flushed my cheeks. I walked steadily through the parking lot, past that gleaming blue truck, a $50,000 monument to my foolishness. I needed to get away, needed space to breathe, to process the public rejection I'd just endured. My old sedan was parked at the far end of the lot. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice before managing to unlock the door. Once inside, I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I closed my eyes and finally allowed myself to feel the full force of what had just happened. Still trying to buy my love with money. The words echoed in my head, each repetition like a fresh slap. And the laughter that followed, Tom's guffaw, Nancy's nervous titter, the uncomfortable shifting of the others. They'd all witnessed my humiliation, my desperate, final attempt to give my son a foundation, laid bare and mocked. I started the car but didn't drive immediately. Through the windshield, I could see the restaurant's warm lights, could picture everyone inside, still eating cake, perhaps, now discussing what had just transpired. Was Mark explaining to Nancy why his mother was so pathetic? Was Tom agreeing that I'd always coddled him? Was Sarah trying to defend me, or was she too embarrassed by association? My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Sarah. Eleanor, are you okay? Where did you go? I didn't respond. I couldn't form words yet, couldn't explain even to the kindest member of my family what I was feeling. The hollowness in my chest was expanding, threatening to consume me entirely. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I pulled myself together enough to drive. I headed not home, but in the opposite direction, toward the lake. There was a small park where my late husband, Arthur, and I used to take Mark as a little boy, before his father's expectations settled on him like a frost. The park was deserted at this hour. I parked and walked to a bench overlooking the water. The moon cast a silver path across the dark lake, and for a moment, I was a young mother again, watching Mark laugh as he threw rocks, his face so open and full of joy. He's a good boy, Eleanor, Arthur had said, his voice softer than usual. Just needs a firm hand. But that firm hand had become a cold one, and I had spent the rest of my life trying to make up for it, trying to shield him, trying to fix him. I'd started to believe I needed to buy his happiness, to prove his worth with money, because his father had never given him any other kind. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. This is Nancy. Mark is concerned. Please let someone know you're safe. Concerned. That was laughable. Mark wasn't concerned. He was probably embarrassed that I'd made a scene by leaving, or annoyed that my departure had disrupted his birthday. I typed back, my fingers stiff, I'm fine. Enjoying some quiet time. Please continue the celebration without me. I even added a polite smiley face, a small, passive-aggressive touch that felt childish even as I sent it. Almost immediately, my phone rang. Sarah. I hesitated, then answered. Eleanor, where are you, dear? Her voice was so kind that the tears welled up again. I just needed some air, I managed. I'm at Lakeview Park. Oh, she sighed heavily. I'm so sorry about what happened. Mark, he doesn't always think before he speaks. This was different, Sarah, I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. He knew exactly what he was saying. And he meant it. It's complicated, Eleanor. The truck, my goodness, that's such an extravagant gift. I think it overwhelmed him. It made him feel small. So that justifies humiliating me in front of everyone? The anger was rising now, pushing through the hurt. He mocked me for trying to. I couldn't finish the sentence, because he was right, wasn't he? After you left, things got very uncomfortable, Sarah continued. Dave tried to laugh it off as a joke, but everyone could tell it wasn't. Nancy looked mortified. Your son just sat there, staring at his cake. I don't care, I said, but of course I did. I cared desperately, and that was the whole problem. The dinner broke up early. Everyone's gone home. Mark took the truck keys. I think he didn't know how to react, Eleanor. A gift that size, from his mother, it just put him on the spot. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Put him on the spot. Is that what we're calling it? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Where are you staying? Do you want to come to our place tonight? Dave and I have the guest room all made up. The offer was tempting. I didn't want to be alone in my empty house, replaying the evening's events until dawn. But I also needed space. Thank you, dear, but I'll be all right at home. I need some time. I understand. But call if you change your mind, no matter how late. We're here for you. After hanging up, I sat for a while longer, watching the moonlight on the water. The hurt was still there, a deep, cold ache in my chest, but the initial shock was wearing off. In its place was a clarity I hadn't expected, a sudden, sharp understanding of the patterns that had defined my relationship with my son for 50 years. I had been trying to fix him, to buy his success, to shield him from every failure. It was nearly midnight when I finally returned to my own dark, quiet house. In the silence of my living room, I made a decision that had been 50 years in the making. I was done chasing, done trying to buy a life for him that he wouldn't build for himself. I picked up my phone and composed an email to Rick at the dealership. There's been a change of plans, I wrote. I need to return the truck. Can we meet early tomorrow morning? His response came quickly, despite the late hour. Of course, Mrs. Vance. Is everything okay? No. Everything was not okay. But maybe, just maybe, it would be that I set my alarm for 5 a.m., then lay down fully clothed on top of my bedspread. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion eventually won out. My dreams were a confused jumble of gleaming blue trucks, birthday cakes with unlit candles, and my son's voice repeating those cutting words over and over, still trying to buy my love with money. The alarm jolted me awake at 5. For a brief, merciful moment, I didn't remember the events of the previous night. Then it all came rushing back, the truck, the toast, the humiliation. I sat up, rubbing my face. I'd slept in my clothes, and my eyes felt swollen from crying. But beneath the lingering hurt was a steely determination that had crystallized during the night. I showered quickly and changed into simple slacks and a sweater. No more dressing to impress. No more trying so hard. By 5:30, I was in my own car, navigating the quiet suburban streets in the pale pre-dawn light. I knew where I was going, Mark's apartment building. I still had a key to his place, for emergencies, though I rarely used it. As I turned into his complex, my headlights swept across a familiar blue shape in his assigned parking spot, the truck. So he'd driven it home after all. The giant bow was gone, probably stuffed in a dumpster nearby. I parked a few spots away and turned off my engine, sitting in the darkness for a moment to collect my thoughts. What I was about to do was dramatic, perhaps even petty for a woman my age. But it also felt necessary, a line in the sand I needed to draw for my own self-respect. I let myself into his building and walked quietly down the hall. Inside, his small apartment was dark, smelling faintly of stale coffee and takeout. I moved silently through the familiar spaces, navigating by memory. On the kitchen counter, I spotted the small gift box I'd given him, now open, the key fob removed. Beside it lay the entire envelope of the truck's paperwork, warranty information, manual, title transfer forms. He hadn't signed anything yet. Good. That would make this easier. I took the key fob and the envelope of paperwork. I paused. Should I leave a note? What would I even say? In the end, I decided silence was more powerful. He'd know exactly why the truck was gone. Back outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. I approached the truck, half expecting to feel regret, but instead, I felt only a calm resolve. This vehicle represented everything unhealthy about our relationship: my desperate need to fix him, his inability to accept my help. Taking it back wasn't just about the hurt of last night. It was about breaking a dysfunctional pattern that had defined most of his life, and mine. The truck started with a quiet rumble that sounded deafening in the silent morning. I backed carefully out of the spot, then drove slowly down the street and out of the apartment complex. In the rearview mirror, I watched his building recede and felt a weight lifting from my shoulders with each passing block. Rick was already at the dealership when I arrived, despite the early hour. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. "Didn't go as planned, Mrs. Vance?" he asked gently. I managed a small, rueful smile. "You could say that." He didn't press for details, for which I was grateful. We went to his office, where I explained that I wanted to return the truck. "I know there's a restocking fee, depreciation costs. I understand I won't get the full amount back." "That's okay." Rick looked uncomfortable. "Let me talk to my manager. Since it's only been one day, and not even 12 hours, maybe we can work something out." While he was gone, I sat in his office, staring at the framed photos on his desk, Rick with his family, all smiles. When Rick returned, he had good news. "We can take it back as a dealer return. There will be a processing fee of $2,000, but the rest will be refunded to your account." It was more than I'd expected. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion that had nothing to do with the money. We spent the next hour processing paperwork, transferring the title back, documenting the truck's condition. Through it all, my phone remained silent in my purse. Mark must not have discovered the truck's absence yet. By 8:30, everything was finalized. I stood in the dealership parking lot, waiting for the taxi that would take me back to my car at Mark's complex. The morning was fully bright now, the June sun warming the air. I felt oddly light, as though I'd put down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. The taxi had just arrived when my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Where is the truck?" Simple, direct, no emotion. Typical. I didn't respond, just got into the taxi. During the 20-minute ride, my phone buzzed several more times. Back at my car, I finally checked my messages. 5 texts from Mark, each increasingly urgent. "Where is the truck?" "Ma, did you take it?" "Answer your phone." "This isn't funny, Ma. I'm calling you, pick up now." The last one made me laugh out loud, a sharp, bitter sound. The police. What would he report? That his mother had taken back the gift he'd mocked her for giving? I typed a brief response: "The truck has been returned to the dealership. Your name was never on the title." His reply came instantly. "Why would you do that?" The question was so lacking in self-awareness that I had to sit there in my car for a moment to respond. My fingers flew across the screen. "You publicly humiliated me. You said I was just trying to buy your love. What did you expect me to do?" No response. I waited 5 minutes, then started my car, needing to get home. In the parking lot, my phone rang. Mark. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. And again. On the 4th call, I finally answered. "What?" His voice was tight, controlled. "You had no right to take that truck." Of all the things he could have said, this was perhaps the most infuriating. I had every right. It was mine. I paid for it. I never completed the title transfer. "It was a gift, Ma," he insisted, his voice rising. "You can't just take back a gift because your feelings got hurt." My feelings got hurt? I repeated, my own voice rising. You publicly humiliated me. You called me a fool in front of your friends, your family, your new girlfriend, for trying to do something to help you. It wasn't help. It was excessive. Inappropriate. No one spends that kind of money on a birthday gift. What were you thinking? What had I been thinking? That this grand gesture would finally break through his lifetime of feeling like a failure, that for once, he'd be grateful, that he'd finally succeed. I was thinking you might appreciate it, I said, my voice suddenly tired. I was wrong. Lesson learned. This is childish, Ma, he said. Returning the truck because of one comment. It wasn't just a comment, Mark. It was a public declaration of how little you think of me. After all these years, after everything. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had that lecturing tone I knew so well. You've always been too sensitive. Your father, he was hard on me, sure, but you always coddled me. You've always tried to just buy your way out of problems. I guess I was preparing you for the fact that you can't. The old justification, the one he'd used for years to explain his own failures. His father was too hard. I was too soft. I'm 78 years old, Mark, I said. I've managed to survive just fine. I'm strong. No thanks to you, apparently. No thanks to me? Now he sounded angry. Who paid for everything? Who just tried to buy you a truck? You did. I acknowledged, but you never gave me what I actually needed. A son who was proud of me. Who showed me he loved me. Who made me feel like I mattered. Silence again. I could almost see him. Jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, the way he always looked when emotions threatened to break through his carefully maintained control. I have to go, I said finally. I'm home, and I'm tired. You're just hanging up? Just like that? Yes. Just like that. Happy birthday, Mark. I hung up before he could respond, turned off my phone, and went inside to my empty house. As I made myself a cup of tea, I realized my hands were shaking, not with fear or hurt, but with a strange, exhilarating sense of freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I'd confronted my son. I'd stood up for myself, rejected the narrative that I was just a walking checkbook, and walked away from the dysfunctional dynamic we'd maintained for decades. It didn't feel good, exactly. It felt awful. But it also felt right, necessary, and long overdue. I checked out of I was home. I kept my phone off for the rest of the day. The moment I turned it on the next morning, it immediately began buzzing with notifications. 30 missed calls, dozens of text messages, even a few emails. It seemed the entire family had opinions about what had transpired. Mark had called 15 times. Sarah, 5. There were even calls from his friends Tom and Dave, and one from Nancy, which surprised me. I scrolled through the text messages, getting progressively sadder with each one. From Mark, Ma, pick up. I'm sorry, okay? From Sarah, I understand why you're hurt, Eleanor. What he said was cruel. But maybe talk to him when you've both cooled down. From Tom, your son's really upset. The truck meant a lot to him. From Dave, Mark is beside himself. Never seen him so worked up. From Nancy, I'm so sorry about what happened. Please call your son. He's a mess. I shoved the phone back in my pocket without responding to anyone. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let them feel a fraction of the anxiety I'd felt my entire life, worrying about Mark, trying to anticipate his moods, trying to mend his problems. My house felt like a sanctuary when I finally walked through the door. I dropped my purse on the hall table, took off my coat, and collapsed on the sofa, emotionally drained. Through the large windows, I could see my own quiet street, the one I'd lived on for 50 years. This house had been my life, my proof that I could build a good home, but it had also been the stage for so much of this pain. It had never felt more empty than it did in that moment. The phone started ringing again. Mark. I silenced it and closed my eyes, breathing deeply. What I needed now was perspective, not another confrontation. I needed to process what had happened. After making myself a cup of tea, I sat in my kitchen nook, watching the shadows lengthen in my backyard. The quiet, both in the house and from my phone, felt crucial to my well-being right now. My phone buzzed with a text. I didn't recognize the number. Eleanor. It's Nancy. Please don't block me. I got your number from Mark's phone. I think we should talk. This was unexpected. I barely knew the woman. What could she possibly have to say? Still, curiosity won out. What about? I texted back. Her response came quickly. About your son. There's more to the story than you know. I hesitated. Was this a manipulation tactic, a way to get me to forgive Mark? Or did Nancy genuinely have insight? I'm listening, I replied. Not over text. Can I call you? I gave her 10 minutes to call, using the time to steady myself. When the phone rang, I answered with a neutral, hello? Eleanor, thank you for taking my call. Nancy's voice was warm but tentative. I know I'm the last person you probably want to hear from right now. You're not the last, I said honestly. That would be my son. She gave a small, sad laugh. Fair enough. Look, I want to apologize for last night. I should never have laughed at what Mark said. It was cruel, and I was just caught off guard. It was a nervous reaction, not because I found it funny. This wasn't what I'd expected. Okay, I said, not sure how else to respond. I've only been dating your son for 4 months, Nancy continued. He talks about you a lot. And about his father. This was news to me. He told me about how his dad was, how hard he was on him. How you were always the one who tried to make things better, the one who always stepped in to help him. My throat tightened. He told you that? I know, Nancy sighed. That's what I'm trying to explain. Your son doesn't know how to accept help, especially not from you. The truck, it overwhelmed him. The gesture was so grand, it just fed right into that old story in his head, the one where his dad told him he wasn't good enough and you had to bail him out. So he called me a fool who was trying to buy his love. My voice was sharp. That's how he handles being overwhelmed? No, she paused. That was him being defensive. When he feels vulnerable, like a failure, he attacks. It's a pattern I've noticed. When something touches him deeply, especially his feelings of inadequacy, he pushes it away with anger. I thought about this. It matched my lifetime of experiences with Mark. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because he's miserable, Eleanor. He's been calling you non-stop. He's been drinking. When he saw the truck was gone this morning, he completely fell apart. Not angry, like I expected, but devastated. He just sat on the steps for an hour, just staring at the empty space. The image was hard to reconcile with the angry, cutting man from the restaurant. What do you want from me, Nancy? Nothing you don't want to give. I just thought you should know there's more to your son than what you saw last night. The mask he wears, it's not the whole person. After we hung up, I sat with her words. Could it be true? Was Mark's cruelty just a shield for his own deep-seated pain and shame? It was a perspective I had considered, but hearing it from a stranger made it different. But even if Nancy was right, it didn't erase decades of his self-destruction and lashing out. Understanding the root of his behavior was one thing. Excusing it was another. My phone rang again. Mark. This time, I answered. Ma, his voice was rough, as though he'd been awake all night. Where are you? I'm home, Mark. You left. You just left. The absurdity of this complaint. Did you expect me to stay for more cake after you called me a fool in front of everyone? He was quiet for a moment. I shouldn't have said that, Ma. Coming from Mark, this was a massive apology. No. You shouldn't have. The truck, he began, then stopped. It was too much, Ma. Too expensive. It made me feel like a charity case. That was for me to decide. It was my money. Money you should be saving, he shot back. Your retirement. Not wasting it on me. This was so typical, turning his shame into a lecture about my finances. It wasn't about need, Mark. It was about giving you a fresh start. About trying to make you happy. Another silence. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, I don't deserve that kind of gift, Ma. The words were so unexpected, I couldn't respond. What do you mean? I asked. I haven't. He struggled, clearly uncomfortable. I know I mess everything up. I'm not good at, well, anything, I guess. Dad was right about me. No, I said, my voice sharp. Don't you say that. It's true, he said, his voice thick. He always said I'd be nothing, and you always tried to prove him wrong, tried to fix me. It didn't make you stronger, Mark, I said, my voice trembling. His cruelty, it made you insecure. And maybe I did try too hard to fix it. Maybe I spent your whole life trying to prove to him that you were worth loving, instead of just letting you be. He made a sound like I'd struck him. That wasn't. I didn't mean. Intentions don't matter as much as impact, Mark, I said, my voice suddenly tired. And the impact is that you're 50 years old and still feel like a failure. And I am 78 and still trying to stop it from being true. You are more than good enough, he said, the words coming out in a rush. I mean, you're my mom. I don't know how to not be this. The guy who screws up. It's a little late, Mark. I know. His voice was heavy with regret. Nancy says I need therapy. This startled a small, watery laugh out of me. Nancy's right. Would it help? If I talk to someone? Would that matter to you? The question caught me off guard. It might, I said cautiously. But I need time, Mark. Last night it was deeply hurtful. I understand, he said. Take the time you need, Ma. I'll be here. After we hung up, I felt emotionally wrung out but strangely peaceful. Something had shifted. I didn't know if it could be repaired, but I would give Mark a chance. But I would also maintain firm boundaries. No more bailing him out, no more measuring my success as a mother by his failures. If our relationship was going to heal, it would have to be on new terms. I texted him before going to bed. I'm willing to work on our relationship, but I need you to understand how deeply your words hurt me. This isn't just about last night. It's about a lifetime. His response came quickly. I know, Ma. I understand. I don't want to lose you. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. 1 year later, I stood in my kitchen, packing a small picnic basket. So much had changed in 12 months. After the birthday dinner disaster, Mark and I had entered a new phase. Tentative, cautious, but more honest. True to his word, he'd started seeing a therapist. It's uncomfortable, Ma, he'd admitted during one of our now regular Sunday dinners. Having to talk about Dad. But it's helping. I had found a new balance as well. I'd stopped revolving my life around his. I joined a gardening club. I took that cruise with my church group that I'd put off. I was living my life, not just waiting to rescue his. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. On my way. Weather looks clear. See you in 10. This was the new Mark. Still practical, but present. I smiled as I texted back. I'll be careful. See you soon. The picnic was for his 51st birthday. No extravagant gifts. No elaborate surprises. Instead, I'd made his favorite sandwiches and a thermos of iced tea. As I waited, I reflected on all that had transpired. The truck incident had cost me financially, that $2,000 fee had stung, but what I'd gained was far more valuable: a new sense of my own boundaries, a clearer understanding of our dysfunctional patterns, and surprisingly, the beginnings of a more authentic relationship with my son. Mark's old truck, the one he'd fixed up himself with parts from a junkyard, pulled up to the curb. He got out and smiled, a real smile. "You made good time," I said as I approached. And then he did something unexpected. He opened his arms for a hug, brief, but real. "Nancy's working," he said, taking the basket from me. "But she sends her love." We're doing good, Ma. Really good." He'd found steady work with a construction crew. He was paying his bills. He was sober. The birthday dinner was at the park, the one I'd fled to a year ago. We sat on a bench, and the conversation flowed more easily than I could ever remember. He talked about his job, about a book he was reading. I shared stories about my gardening club. He was present in a way he hadn't been before, listening, asking questions. After we ate, I gave him his card. He opened it, read it, and tucked it carefully into his pocket. "I've been thinking a lot about last year," he said suddenly. "About the truck." I tensed slightly. We hadn't spoken directly about that night in months. "What about it?" "I was wrong, Ma. Not just what I said at the dinner, but how I reacted. I was overwhelmed, yes. But I was also so ashamed." "Ashamed? Of what?" He sighed, searching for words. "That you felt you needed to do something so grand to fix me. That I'd been such a screw-up that you thought you needed to buy me a future. And then I made it worse by lashing out, hurting you publicly. I've regretted it every day since." The apology, so clear and specific, washed over me. "I think we were both caught in a dysfunctional pattern," I said after a moment. "Me trying desperately to save you, you lashing out because you didn't want to be saved. It was bound to explode eventually." He nodded slowly. "My therapist says something similar. That relationships get stuck in patterns that feel familiar, even when they're harmful." "That sounds about right." We sat in silence for a while, comfortable in a way we'd never been. Finally, Mark spoke again. "I am grateful for you, Ma. Not because of, money, or any of that. But just because of who you are. Your kindness, your resilience, your willingness to give me another chance after everything. I should have told you that every day of my life." The words I'd waited decades to hear, they brought tears to my eyes, but not the bitter, frustrated tears of the past. These were tears of release. "Thank you, Mark," I said simply. "That means a lot." As I drove home later that evening, I reflected on how much had changed. The painful birthday dinner had been a breaking point, but also a breakthrough. By standing up for myself, by refusing to accept less than I deserved, I'd created space for something new. The healing wasn't complete, of course. But we were both committed to the process. The greatest gift had been learning that my worth as a mother wasn't dependent on my son's success, that I could set boundaries, speak my truth, and still be loved. That I'd spent most of my life trying to buy my son's happiness. The truck had been the culmination of that misguided effort, the grandest, most desperate attempt. In losing that $50,000, I'd gained something priceless, the understanding that true love isn't earned through grand gestures, but given freely, with boundaries. The most valuable gift I'd given myself wasn't the truck I'd bought for Mark, but the moment I stood up and walked out of that restaurant with my dignity intact. The moment I decided I deserved better. The moment I stopped trying to be the perfect, rescuing mother and realized I had been a good mother all along. Have you ever found yourself trying to buy someone's approval or affection? Or have you been on the receiving end of a grand gesture that felt more like an obligation than a gift? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please follow along for more, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, your worth isn't determined by anyone else's ability to see it. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of your heart. It's the most valuable thing you own.